Margaret Atwood's novelised adaptation of Shakespeare's The Tempest, that is Hagseed, transforms the idea of autonomy through her postmodern exploration of the paradox of fate and free will. Ultimately, Atwood brings new meaning to The Tempest by subverting the confining nature of fate and instead presenting the cathartic potential free will holds. Shakespeare establishes the notion of autonomy as an uncontrollable force, a force controlled by fate due to his Jacobean context, demonstrated in the play being riddled with supernatural elements. Conversely, Atwood acknowledges the omniscient power of fate but establishes free will as the principle, due to her secular postmodern context reflected in her realist perspective. Atwood grapples with the paradox of fate and free will by reinventing fate's power over Prospero's autonomy through Felix's control and manipulation of his identity, and in doing so explores the cathartic relief of free will. In The Tempest, the metaphorical language and celestial imagery in Prospero's statement, "I find my zenith does depend upon a most auspicious star," symbolises his belief in the overpowering nature of fate, referred to as the auspicious star, as this fate has control over his zenith and hence future. Similarly, Atwood comments on the powerful force of destiny through her fictional embodiment of fate, Estelle, who acts as Prospero's auspicious star and who he appropriately calls his Lady Luck. This intertextuality reflects Atwood's realism yet acknowledgement of fate. However, Atwood simultaneously challenges the influence fate has over one's autonomy through Felix's adoption of an alter ego by becoming the enigmatic Mr. Duke. The use of metatextual references creates an explicit correlation between Prospero, Duke of Milan, and Felix, thus adding a self-referential layer to the novel and encouraging the reader to question whether fate or free will controls autonomy. Ultimately, Prospero's inability to control his autonomy leads him into a state of nihilism and confusion. This is seen at the end of the play in Eternal 2, I'll Walk to Still My Beating Mind, as Prospero's metaphorical beating mind represents his struggle in comprehending the uncontrollable nature of fate, and hence his autonomy. Finally, Prospero's confusion culminates into desperation as he breaks the fourth wall in the epilogue and asks the audience to set me free, demonstrating how his loss of autonomy has led him into a demise of meaninglessness. Conversely, Atwood explores how Felix's free will allows him to achieve a cathartic release by letting go of his suffering, demonstrated through imagery of springs such as ice melting and birds turning up, thus reflecting Felix's ability to control his autonomy as he tells the elements be free. Therefore, due to Atwood's postmodern context, she reinvents Prospero's inability to control his autonomy due to the power of fate through Felix's free will, and thus brings new meaning to The Tempest as she reflects on the liberating nature of free will. Furthermore, we see Atwood's transposition of autonomy progress through her recreation of Caliban as the prisoners. Atwood mirrors Shakespeare's construction of Caliban as the other, yet deconstructs Caliban's loss of autonomy by presenting the freedom the prisoners experience in theatre, thus continuing to give new insight into the cathartic potential of free will. Shakespeare presents Caliban as an embodiment of French philosopher Montaigne's essay entitled Of Cannibals, which suggested native populations were superior to the egocentric Western colonizers. He establishes this in the accumulation of natural imagery in Caliban's speech to Prospero, the fresh springs, brine pits, barren place.